For the past few weeks, I've been seeing a woman in my dreams. She is beautiful and lovely in every way. I've always been a lonely man, never having much luck with women, and I've always been antisocial, never going out much. At first, when I began dreaming of her, it felt like magic, like my dreams were another world where I finally had someone. I almost preferred sleep over the real world. Every night she would appear. We would meet in different places, sometimes a quiet meadow under the stars, other times in a small, cozy room that felt like home, even though I had never seen it before. She never spoke, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. It was like she knew me, understood me in a way no one ever had. The way she looked at me with those deep, mesmerizing eyes made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't alone anymore. I started going to bed earlier, eager to see her again, to escape into that perfect world where she waited for me. It was intoxicating, the way she made me feel wanted. It wasn't long before I found myself longing for sleep more than the waking hours. The loneliness that had haunted me for so long started to fade, replaced by the comfort of her presence in my dreams. But then, things began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A few nights ago, something changed. Something felt off about the woman, though I couldn't place exactly what it was. She looked the same, still as beautiful, still as perfect, but her silence became cold. Her gaze, the one that once made me feel seen and understood, now felt different, sinister somehow. It wasn't obvious at first. Anyone else might have seen her expression as friendly, even inviting, but there was something lurking behind her eyes. My gut told me there was more to her. Something dark, something evil. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just overthinking it. After all, it was just a dream, right? But that feeling, the creeping sense of dread, it wouldn't go away. It clung to me even after I woke up, like a shadow following me through the day. It was subtle, almost like a whisper, but I could feel it growing. Whatever she was, whatever she had become, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer safe with her. For the first time in weeks, as I lay down to sleep, I hoped I wouldn't dream of her. That sense of anticipation I once had was gone, replaced by a quiet dread. But as sleep came, I was back with the woman. This time we were in a vast garden, flowers blooming everywhere, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. She beckoned me to follow her, and for a moment, I had forgotten my fears. But as I walked behind her, that same creeping sense of dread began to return. Something wasn't right about her anymore. Her smile was too wide, her stare too piercing, like some kind of predator that had its prey in sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As we wandered through the garden, the scenery around us began to shift. The vibrant flowers wilted, the sky darkened, and the once tranquil air became heavy, oppressive. My heart raced as I realized this wasn't just a dream. It was something far more dangerous. My suspicions were confirmed when I tried to wake myself. Have you ever had one of those nightmares where you knew you were dreaming but you can't wake up? It was exactly like that. Panic set in. I struggled to pull myself out of the dream, but the more I tried, the more I felt her eyes on me, sharp and knowing. She seemed to sense what I was doing. Her movements quickened, and she came toward me, her smile never fading, but I could feel a dark intensity behind it. She wanted to keep me there, trapped with her. I woke up just before she could reach me, my heart pounding in my chest. That smile of hers never left her face, but beneath it, I sensed a frustration, a quiet fury that chilled me to the bone. After that last dream, I knew I couldn't let myself fall asleep again. I stayed awake the entire next day, forcing myself to keep going, no matter how tired I felt. I drank more coffee than I ever had in my life, paced around my apartment, and tried to distract myself with anything I could think of. Anything to avoid seeing her again. Every time I closed my eyes, even for a second, I could feel her presence waiting for me. But no one can fight sleep forever. Eventually, the exhaustion caught up with me. I passed out while watching TV, unable to fight it any longer. As soon as I drifted off, I was back in that strange world, and she was there, waiting for me. But this time, something about her was different. Worse. Her form was distorted now, though still somehow beautiful, but in a way that made my skin crawl. It was like staring at something that shouldn't exist, something both human and not. Her movements were too fluid, her limbs too long, her smile stretched too wide. That familiar sense of dread returned, stronger than ever before. Every instinct I had screamed for me to run, to get away from her, but I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my body paralyzed with fear as she drew closer. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I tried to wake up again, but this time, it wasn't working. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't pull myself out of the dream. The woman was getting closer, her eyes fixed on me with that same cold hunger. I felt my body tremble with fear, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, just like before. Then, before I could react, she was there, her arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. At first, I didn't know what to do. It was like everything inside me froze. Her body pressed against mine, but instead of warmth, I only felt cold, a deep, lifeless chill that seeped into my bones. Her grip tightened, and I could feel the strength behind it, far more than any human should have. It was crushing, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I tried to push her away, but I was powerless. The harder she squeezed, the more I struggled to breathe. My chest burned, and panic filled me as I realized I couldn't get free. I gasped for air, but nothing came. I woke up on my couch, gasping for air. My lungs felt like they were on fire, and my chest ached from the pressure. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was, still dazed and half lost in the nightmare, my mind racing as I struggled to make sense of what just happened. Maybe it was sleep apnea, I thought. Maybe that's why I couldn't breathe in the dream. My body must have struggled for air, and my mind reflected it. It made sense. Or at least it was the only explanation that didn't make me feel like I was losing it. I told myself it was all just a coincidence. But later that day, something else happened. As I was getting dressed, I felt a stinging on my back. When I went to check it out in the mirror, I saw it. Scratch marks. Thin red lines running down my back, like someone had clawed at me. I was confused, staring at them in disbelief. Maybe it was the couch, I thought. Maybe I shifted in my sleep and something on the fabric scraped me. Still, I couldn't shake the idea that somehow, she did this. It sounded insane, I knew that. But every time I looked at those marks, I felt a cold, creeping fear in the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't go back to sleep. Not after that. I had to figure out how to stop dreaming of her. But how? How do you control something as unpredictable as your dreams? I felt helpless, but I couldn't just sit back and wait for her to come back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I researched. I spent hours scouring forums, reading articles, and watching videos about dream control. That's when I learned about lucid dreaming. Being aware that you're dreaming while it's happening. It sounded impossible, like something out of a movie, but some people swore by it. They claimed that with enough practice, you could shape your dreams, even banish nightmares. It was my only hope. If I could become aware that I was dreaming, maybe I could stop her. Maybe I could finally escape. I looked up methods for practicing lucid dreaming and decided to give it a try. I spent hours meditating, focusing on her, picturing her face, and telling myself over and over that I would banish her from my dreams. I needed to be in control. Slowly, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted off to sleep. There she was again, standing in the same haunting silence, beckoning me to come closer. But this time, I knew I couldn't. I planted my feet, forcing myself to stay where I was. I had to control my dreams. I screamed at her, telling her to go away. She stood still, staring at me, as if contemplating my defiance. Her smile, the one that had always been present, slowly began to fade, replaced by something far more chilling, an angered frown. Without a word, she turned away and walked into the shadows. For a moment, I thought I had won. She wasn't there anymore. I continued to dream, but as the minutes passed by, I started to lose control. The awareness that I was dreaming began to slip away, and I forgot I was even asleep. That's when it happened. I was walking through a bright, bustling city full of people. Everything felt warm and peaceful, but as I turned a corner, I bumped into her. She was different this time, her form even more twisted and sinister. Her long arms were tipped with sharp claws, and her once perfect face was distorted into something far more terrifying. She reached out for me, and I tried to run, but it was too late. Her claws dug into my skin, slashing across my face. The burning pain was unbearable, and as the world around me faded into darkness, I heard her scream, a sound that wasn't human, an unnatural, monstrous wail that echoed in my ears. Then I woke up, my heart pounding, the pain from her claws still fresh in my mind. I went straight to the bathroom, desperate to shake off the remnants of the nightmare, but when I looked in the mirror, I froze. There, on my face, were the claw marks, thin, jagged lines that trailed across my cheeks. My heart sank at the sight. This wasn't just a dream anymore. Somehow, she had reached through my nightmares and left a mark on me in the real world. I couldn't deny it any longer. She meant to hurt me, and she could. It seemed impossible. How could something from a dream do this? But the scratches were there, raw and real. Staring back at me in my reflection, my mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. All I knew was that if I went back to sleep, she would come for me again. I stayed awake for 3 days after that, pushing my body to its limits. I tried everything: coffee, loud TV, pacing the floor, anything to keep my eyes open. But no one can outrun exhaustion forever. I could feel it creeping in, weighing down my limbs, clouding my thoughts. I knew it wouldn't be long until I passed out, no matter how much I tried to fight it. And when that happened, I knew she'd be waiting. I wanted so badly to stay awake. Every fiber of my being dreaded the thought of what else might happen to me if I slept. But no matter how much I fought, exhaustion finally won, and I passed out. This time, the moment I saw her, I didn't hesitate. I ran. She gave chase, her voice echoing in the distance. But it wasn't a scream this time. It was worse. It was a garbled mess of sounds, like she was trying to talk to me but couldn't make out the words. It was twisted, unnatural, and filled with something far more terrifying than just anger. I kept running, my legs burning, my lungs aching, but she was faster. She caught up to me. Her hands gripped me, cold and unrelenting. She turned me to face her. I couldn't believe what I saw. The woman I had once thought so beautiful now looked monstrous. Her smile stretched wide, filled with jagged teeth. Her once perfect eyes now sunken and dark, as if hollowed out by something evil. Then, she kissed me. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt. It was as if she was sucking the life out of me, draining everything I had. I could feel my energy slipping away, my body weakening as her lips pressed against mine. It felt like dying. And then, just as the darkness started to consume me, I woke up, my heart pounding, my chest heaving as I gasped for air. I lay in bed a while, tears welling in my eyes. How could my dreams turn against me so violently? How could that woman, once so sweet, so beautiful, become this nightmare, a monster that was hurting me? It didn't make any sense. The fear I felt was unbearable, and the line between reality and my dreams seemed to blur more with each passing night. Eventually, I got up to go to the bathroom, my body weak, trembling. After using the toilet, I splashed some cold water on my face, hoping it would ground me, bring me some sense of peace. The water felt serene, cold and comforting. I clung to the sensation, relishing the simple relief of being awake and being safe in the real world where she couldn't reach me. I let out a deep breath, relieved, but as I dried my face with the towel and looked in the mirror, my heart stopped. There she was, standing behind me in the dimly lit corridor of my hallway, her twisted form barely visible in the shadows.